Well, we will make a start. Kathy's going to just keep letting people in as they arrive to the session. So people just keep popping in, but we'll kick off because we've got lots to get through today. So it's my very great pleasure to welcome Sheila Vijeyarasa to the session today. She sent me a copy of her wonderful book. It's called The Power of Little Steps, which is the basis for this interview. And we'll pop a link in the chat at some point before we finish up with a link to buy the book on Amazon for those who are interested. But Sheila, I don't like to generally sort of just read somebody's bio out to the group. So I might kick off by just asking you to tell us a little bit about you and your career.
So I'll just read out my own bio. That's fine. I'm absolutely fine to do that. We're all seasoned in this room. So I think we've all probably had very eclectic career paths, and I'm no different. So I'm a chartered accountant. I did an MBA, and I ended up as a finance director in publishing. So publishing was one of the most disrupted industries in the last 15 years. So I was a CFO and managing ops during that time. And then I quit that. I got the calling to become a coach about 10 years ago. And then I studied NLP, executive coaching, spiritual modalities like Buddhism. I did Hare Krishna for a while. I've done different religions. I experienced ayahuasca with shamans in Peru. I've done high performance coaching. And so now I do motivational speaking, corporate coaching. I do one-on-one mentoring. And then I had this beautiful, interesting opportunity to share my IVF journey on the television show Big Miracles. And it was interesting because here I am being a coach, and I'm more of a perfectionist and a high achiever. And I thought, I'm going to go on this show and show what it's like to be a high performing, overachieving woman that can make things happen. And 3 seasons later, I was limping past the finishing line. I did 7 rounds of IVF, and I ended up becoming a donor mother. And I think it's relevant for my career because it really branded me as brave. So all my messaging is around brave leadership, how we be brave in both our personal and professional lives.
Wonderful. So what really prompted you to write this particular book?
I think what I've seen in my leadership coaching, I do a lot of coaching for women in leadership, is we want change from clients. We want change within our own lives, and we're not really sure how to do it. And much like my first book, which is called Brave, and that's embracing our spiritual path, this book, The Power of Little Steps, is about embracing change, transition, and difficult things. And we all have to go through something big, bad in our life. We all do. It's the human growth experience, whether that's death, whether that's fertility, whether that's financial ruin, whether that's job loss. We will all lose our parents at some point. And I wrote this book to help women and men understand how do we navigate the path of challenges and how do we be brave. And I set the premise of the book up that brave is the only choice we have. And I use the science from Dr. David Hawkins. Does anyone here know Dr. David Hawkins? Has anyone read his research? He's got a fantastic book called Power versus Force. And he shows how we can be in our power and magnetize and attract situations versus trying to force outcomes. And his research is predicated on the scale of human emotions. And he ranked all of our emotions from lowest to highest. Does anyone here want to take a guess what the lowest ranked emotions we experience as humans is? Does anyone want to take a guess? You can write in the chat. What do you think is the lowest ranked human emotion we can experience? You can have a guess, and if you don't want to, that's okay. I mean, Ross, can you have a go at answering? What's the lowest emotion we can experience as humans?
I was going to say shame.
Yep, it's shame. And Joe just said anger, and anger is low. Anger isn't considered on the spectrum of negative emotions. Shame is the lowest. It's ranked at an energy level of 20. Shame is ranked at an energy level of, I think, about 170. That's why we like anger more than shame. Why? We're productive. We're productive when we're angry. You ever done that? Gotten to work going, I'm going to show them, and you're just typing away and you're angry. And that's why we like anger. We don't like shame because we don't want to get out of bed when we're in shame. We're very lethargic. There's no productivity. There's actually very little momentum forward in our life. So what he did in his research is he discovered that the first positive emotion that dissolves all negative emotions is bravery. It's the first positive emotion we can experience. So a lot of people think it's joy or it's love or it's peace or it's enlightenment. You know, they're way higher, way higher. It's very hard to jump from shame to happy. It's very hard to jump from angry to happy. We need an emotion to go through. So Dr. David Hawkins didn't actually discover it was brave. That was I extrapolated that. And that's what I talk about in my keynotes. So my whole premise for the book is if there's anything you're going to do every day, it's be brave. So a lot of people speak about kindness and empathy, meditation and mindfulness. They're fantastic topics, but you need to be brave to begin. You need to be brave to be kind to someone who's not kind to you. You need to be brave to meditate when you've got a monkey mind. You need to be brave to have compassion when you're overwhelmed, right? So I looked at my life and I was like, how did I get through 3 years of IVF? How did I quit my corporate job as a CFO and start writing my first book? You know, how did I overcome redundancy, job loss? How did I not give up on finding my soulmate? I got married at 45. I met my soulmate at 44. I'm now 49. I know I don't look 49, but I am. So I'm 50 next year. And so it was brave. The whole time I was brave. And so my book, the premise of Brave is bravery. I'm going to talk about everyday bravery and little brave acts, the power of little brave acts every day.
I love that. And I really love the idea that brave is the emotion that gets us through or gets us away from those negative emotions. I really love that concept. And look, one of the things I noticed in the book is that at the end of every chapter, you've got a lovely piece where you've got brave truths, brave questions, and brave mantras. I was wondering if you could share with us your favorite brave mantra.
Oh, wow. I had a feeling you were going to ask me something like that, Ros, and I thought I should be prepared, and I'm not. So I'm going to be brave right now and be impulsive. I think I just opened to this page. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I love every mantra. Every word in this book I love. I worked in publishing for 15 years. So whilst I was in finance and operations, I read books. So I think are there any writers in our group, anyone that's written a book or halfway through writing a book? Ros is, yes. Anyone dream of writing a book with no one that wants to? No one wants to draw. That's okay. You don't have to. So if you want to write a book, you've got to read books. So I read a lot of books. I read and read and read. So I love the art of writing. I love the art of words and how we can take human experiences and write them really beautifully. So I've opened to a page here, and my brave mantra on this page is I surrender to the life that is waiting for me. So I come from a Sri Lankan conservative culture. My father's a retired doctor. He was one of 7 boys. He wanted 3 sons of his own, ended up having 3 daughters. And so I was raised with a very masculine paradigm. My dad had ambitions for us if only we were boys, right? So he kind of raised us to be men in some ways, some elements. And I think I was given a construct to live by, an identity that involved job titles and degrees and success. But the life that was waiting for me was really, I quit my corporate career and decided to write a book. If you're Southeast Asian, you don't do that. You don't just quit your job to write a book. So a lot of people are like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm done with accounting. And it was hard. It was a hard decision to make because there's very few jobs at an executive level in publishing. So I got one of these coveted roles that I really thought I want to get one of these roles for 10 years. And then when I got there, I realized there was this whole other life waiting for me. And so I surrendered to the life that was waiting for me, not the one that I thought I needed to have. And from that moment of quitting my job and writing that first book all those years ago, I've lived bravely and I've said yes to every opportunity that's been presented to me. And it's served me well because I've looked at life as more of an adventure in my 40s. And I haven't been as goal oriented. I've lived more from a place of, I wonder what version of me is waiting on the other side of this experience. So I've been invited to speak in Canada in October. I'm doing a roadshow. That's really out of my comfort zone. And so when I said yes, I was like, I wonder what that's going to be like. I wonder who I am on the other side of that. I'm probably going to be expanded. And I think there's many opportunities we're all being asked to do. I think the human experience is we don't like change or transformation or transition. it can be very uncomfortable purely because our identity has to dissolve. And fundamentally, we've got to disappoint people on the way to becoming who we want to be. That's the biggest thing I've had to come up against, is who I need to disappoint to become the most authentic version of myself. And it tends to be our family of origin. It tends to be people that feel safe when they're around us. And when we start living bravely, which to them could be seen as living dangerously, can make them feel uncomfortable. Who can relate to that? Can anyone kind of get that? Okay, we've got some sort of nods and some yeses.
Absolutely. And look, in the book, you talk about the idea that real progress is coming from tiny, consistent actions, so it's taking those small steps regularly. Have you got any, I suppose, a little step that you took in your journey where it really changed everything? It may not have been a little step, it could have been a really big step, but the point in time where it really shifted for you?
I think for me, there's been several. The first was quitting my corporate job when I was a finance director to write my book, because I was leaving behind a job I did actually love on many levels. I was leaving behind the safety of a salary. I was leaving behind an identity that I really had become very attached to for a decade. I mean, we've become very attached to our job descriptions and our roles. And I was entering this no man's land of writing a book, and I'd never written. Now, I know that's maybe not always relatable to people, but I do feel, I have a theory, and I write one of this every chapter is a favorite chapter. Every chapter is like a child. But I loved writing Late Bloomer, my chapter on blooming late, because I don't think we can get everything wonderful in our life done in our 20s and 30s. There are some amazing things we will achieve in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I feel like all of us need to learn how to transition and pivot. And because we're living longer and we're healthier and we've got, so much wisdom and our mental faculties, I think there's something in it for all of us where we need to learn how to have multiple careers. I think especially in the age of AI, it's a level playing field for all of us. We all need to learn reinvention, and instead of being resentful or angry or tired, which I know we can feel as we get older, we need to learn, how do I gain vitality? Like, I'm a mother. I'm 48 years old right now, and I've got a 1-year-old. So I'm constantly looking at, where does vitality come from in my late 40s with a 1-year-old, which is something you typically do at 28 or 38. So quitting my job many years ago was a big, brave act. The little brave acts prior to that was starting to have conversations with my friends about it. It was getting an Excel spreadsheet out and budgeting a year of what I would have to save. It was not online shopping and saving, knowing I'm about to quit my job. So it was all those small, brave acts that were consistent every day that literally changed the course of my life. And there's many premises for what success is predicated on. I believe it's having a strong vision, being determined and disciplined towards that vision, and I think it's turning up every day, even when it's boring, and going, no, that is where I'm going, and not quitting.
That's so important, isn't it? I just flipped over to that chapter, and you've got a great quote here from Carl Jung. Life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you're just doing research.
Absolutely.
I love that one. So you talk in the book about having multiple purposes rather than one big grand calling. And how could you, I suppose, as listeners, how can we identify and integrate these into our lives?
We definitely don't have one big purpose. I think we'll look back and there'll be a narrative. So for me, it's about empowering women to be brave. I run the Brave Woman program, women in leadership programs, and I speak conferences to men and women. So I run the Brave Leader too. However, my purpose has been made up of micro purposes. And every micro purpose has taught me a new skill, given me a new network, and given me new friends and relationships. And so we live our life in seasons. And every micro purpose has had the 4 seasons in it. It's had a spring, and then a summer, an autumn, and a winter. And then I'll do the next new micro purpose. But the purposes all add together like bricks in a house to make this grander, solid structure for our larger purpose. Now, for me, many, many years ago, when I started to work with my first mentors, my ever-present question in most sessions was, what is my purpose? what is my purpose? What am I here to do? And they all gently guided me to the next thing. They're like, right now, you're just going to help one person do this. Now you're going to teach this program. Just write the first module. So we kind of wait for this grand feeling of purpose. Now that I feel truly aligned in purpose work for over a decade, I'm not saying I wasn't when I was in publishing, but there was a real ego attached to the salary I had, the title I had, who I was managing. There was just a lot of that mixed in. So I loved it. I don't feel like it was a micro purpose being around authors that allowed me one day to write a book. I feel like you've landed in purpose when there's a real sense of peace and fulfillment. Purpose always involves serving. It doesn't have to involve serving big groups. It's serving family. It could be serving, you could be a grandparent helping your children with grandkids so they can go out and have influence in the world, but that's still purpose. Purpose changes in our seasons of our life. So I think the biggest thing with purpose is knowing there's many purposes. There's a season to every purpose. So we've got to be masters of transitioning and pivoting. Purpose doesn't feel grand. It feels actually quiet. Our ego needs to dissolve when we discover our purpose, because it will generally involve other people. Every part of my purpose, where it's launching a podcast, writing a book, writing a course, helping this client when I do one-on-one mentoring, it's all purpose. It's all outward facing. And it's always tapping into the wisdom from all of our challenges in our life is purpose. It's like making sense of childhood trauma or challenges or being bullying or IVF struggles. Like I've launched recently a Brave Through IVF program, and I was resisting it. Well, that's another thing we do. We resist our purpose because this imposter syndrome comes up. So I resisted it for 12 months. Then I finally sat down over Christmas break and I did all my modules. And I was like, okay, this is my next purpose. I never knew I would mentor women through IVF. I didn't see that coming, but I've leaned into this season of my purpose. So does that answer purpose for you there, Roz?
It does. I love that. My purpose is releasing true potential.
There you go.
It does. It gets, I suppose, represented in a lot of different ways, like you were saying. Like I sort of look at I've got 2-year-old grandsons now and another grandson in Melbourne who's a year-old. And it's, for me, that's a new season for me. It's like, how do I release true potential in my grandsons as they grow up? So it's, the season's changing. I really relate to that. I love that bit for you. So when we look at growth is often messy. It's uncomfortable. Like you said, we make other people in our lives uncomfortable, which can be really hard to work our way through. And often people get terrified of taking even that really small step because of who they're going to disappoint, and their own ego gets in the way. So what advice would you give to somebody if they're like, I see what I need to do, I see what I want to do, but I'm just too scared, I can't get there?
The first is, no, you will disappoint people. So if you instead of like, will I, that also keeps you stuck. You're trying to answer the wrong question. Will I, won't I, keeps you stuck. I kept on thinking, will I disappoint my dad and mum? Will I? Well, yeah, I will, because I'm not living incongruent to their values. I'm living now congruent to my own. So when you're living congruent to your own values that are different from someone else's values, you will disappoint them. So just understanding values, I think, is a really important part of personal development work. And then you stop beating up on yourself and you stop beating up on them, because you're like, that's their values and these are my values and they're just different. So that's the first point, is in taking the first step, is just doing some journal reflection work on that, knowing you will disappoint someone else. Then I call it, in my first book, actually, I've written, and in this book too, both books, I've written questions about honest questions. I call them dangerous questions. In my first book, I call them dangerous. I'm less kind of, I was a bit younger when I wrote that book, so it was all a bit dramatic. So it is dangerous when you first have a spiritual awakening. It feels dangerous, this new life, because there's such a disappointment to those around you. But they're dangerous questions only because there's change that's being asked of you. So one important question I ask is, like, what regret will you have in 5 years' time if you don't make the change today? And if you don't have a big regret, then you're not ready enough to make the change. And if that doesn't feel like time pressure enough, what regret will you have on the 26th of May in 2026? So the thing you're complaining about, the job, don't like my job, not really happy in my marriage, wish I could start, blah, blah, blah. I want more money. I'm still waiting on the pension. You fast forward a whole year and nothing's changed. How do you feel? So I create urgency for myself. I don't wait for the universe to do it. If we wait for the universe to do it, it's quite often painful. It's quite sudden and painful and dramatic. So I create urgency in my own life. So I start moving more in alignment with where my higher self or soul or intuition is taking me. So that's another process creates urgent. Spotlight out bigger. What is your vision for your life? So we manifest and co-create based on our larger vision. And I write about this in this book. I write about the problem women have, and men too, is we have no vision, or we have false visions, or small vision. So I want you to look at the areas of your life. Where do you have no vision? So you need a vision in every part of your life. Where do we have small visions? Look at your income earning potential, double it. Why couldn't you earn double the money? Look at the health and well-being, double it. So I get my clients to double and triple. So we play big games. So there's no vision, or there's a false vision where we're doing it to please husbands and wives or people around us, right? So it's not really our own vision. Or we're waiting for the kids to leave home before we do the vision. So it's their vision, not our own. So have such an amazing vision. You're like, I have to make the changes. That's another urgency, a way to create urgency. And you really need to work with a mentor or a coach when you do this. You need to work with Roz, someone around, because we'll have blind spots. I work even with I'm a coach too. I work with my own coaches. I'm like, I'm not dreaming big enough. I want to be a speaker in the US and do corporate training. And I want to live part-time in both. So I've needed people to help me create the vision, because what happens, I block it. I go, well, how do you get a visa? And how? I worry about the how. And I've just got to keep on holding on to the vision. So to answer your question, Roz, what's one little step is firstly knowing you're going to disappoint people, working with a coach and mentor to create the vision, and realizing what small change do I need to make today so that in 12 months' time, there's been a shift in my life.
And you're absolutely right about the universe will eventually do it for you. And I had that experience. So I was in corporate thinking about, I'd really like to do something else. I had this big vision for what I really thought I could do. And I didn't do it. And then I got cancer. And it was one of those sort of things where it took that really big nudge to get me off the couch and get me doing something. I had 6 months of treatment to think about, what I wanted to do when I grew up, I suppose. And something like that, it really put life in perspective for me. And I realized then I had to do it now because life's too short. But it sort of took that huge nudge.
Yes. And I constantly, with my husband, we look at the ecosystem of our life, and I'm trying to get ahead of the curve. Like, we have to get ahead. Because our heart, our gut, our mind are telling us the change we need. But when we delay it, the universe actually is conspiring to help give us what we want. It can be just bumpy. So I've been made redundant. I've been fired. I've had dramatic breakups, in the most dramatic way. And so when I look back, I wanted those endings, and I didn't know how to make them. So it's when I see an ending that needs to be made, I'll work with my own, tools, and I'll get ahead and I'll go, okay, why am I so challenged right now to let that go? Why am I so challenged to stop doing that? And even writing this book. So I wrote this book in my third trimester of my pregnancy, and I wrote it in the first 12 weeks of Phoenix's life. And my intuition was write this book. It's really important. So season 3, Big Miracles air, and then 2 months later, this book comes out, and it's all lining up perfectly. And my intuition was just do, my vision was do what my heart is telling me. And quite often, and I've got better at that as I've gone more into my 40s, because I know if I don't, there's a price to pay. there's a price to pay.
Absolutely. And it's also, I love the fact that you didn't make excuses, because for a lot of people, going through IVF, first 12 weeks of a baby's life, that's tough. You'd have every reason in the world to go, this is actually too hard, I'm going to park the book. So it's just amazing that you pushed on and did it.
Do you know something? We only need to know one other person that's done it, not even that. So there's a lady called Clementine Ford. I read her book many, many, many years ago. Run Like a Girl, I think it's called, or something like that. I can't remember. In the book, she talks about writing a book, and her son or daughter is 3 weeks old. And I thought, wow, and you got to remember, I was surrounded by authors. And I thought, wow, you can write a book with a 3-week-old child. Who knew? So she planted in my consciousness it can be done. It's like the 1 minute mile or the 4 minute mile? How long does it take to run a mile? 1 minute, right?
4 minutes. 4 minutes.
4 minutes. 4 minute mile had never been broken, and then one person breaks it, and then after then, what were there? 10 people that broke it within, because it planted in the consciousness it can be done.
There's a lot of power in that, isn't there?
A lot of power. And there's another story I heard recently. So there are some indigenous cultures in South America, older women, they've never been told you're too old to have a baby. So what do you think happens to these cultures? These women are still falling pregnant in their mid to late 40s and early 50s. Not saying they've got fertility forever, because no one has said to them, you can't do it. They have got no point of reference of that. So studies have shown that these women are falling pregnant in their late 40s. So I watch when someone says to me, it can't, I'm like, it can't for you. Doesn't mean it can't for me. So I watch the can'ts around me. I keep them at arm's length. And if someone really says I can't, I go, well, tell me why. So like, is there information here I need to negate? Is there information here I need to address? But if someone tells me they can't because it's their belief set, I realize it's your belief, not mine.
Beautiful. Now, one of the things you talk about in the book is boundary setting for performance. And it's one of those things that's really at the heart of high performance, being able to set and hold good boundaries. But a lot of people really struggle with it. So have you got any tips or maybe a boundary setting practice that you'd recommend to people who are finding it difficult to say no to things?
So you've got to start small with boundary setting, because fundamentally, as humans, we're scared of not belonging. We're scared of disappointing others, being abandoned. Especially women more than men. Men also in their softer nature will experience that too. You have to accept that when you put in place a boundary, the first emotion that comes up, or the first two emotions, are shame and guilt. We put in place a boundary, we feel immediate shame and guilt because we put the boundary in place. So mastery of boundaries is mastery of shame and guilt. How do we master shame and guilt? We're brave. So we've got to know we're honoring ourselves, even if it means disappointing someone else. That's the first step about boundaries. Secondly, knowing boundaries is not about aggression or anger or about conflict. Boundary is a route to connection, and boundaries is the route to progress. And fundamentally, boundaries is a self-love language. So if we're exhausted and angry and resentful because of a lack of boundaries, we're fundamentally abandoning ourselves, and at some point we'll burn out. So know that every single person on the planet has to learn boundaries. However, we'll have to learn it more than others if we had parents that didn't show us or role model this to us. So I do work with clients where I get them to look into what boundaries did their parents show them. And if you weren't shown boundaries, no, I had to learn these as an adult. Although that was uncomfortable, once you've learned it, you've learned it.
And for a lot of children too, their first attempts to set boundaries can be pushed through by parents, overstepped by parents. And they then learn that setting boundaries is pointless because someone's going to walk all over them anyway. So there's a lot in that childhood conditioning, isn't there?
Yeah, not only that, it's as children, we can't handle big emotions. So if we pushed a boundary with a father or a mother and they got angry, that's quite frightening for a child. If we pushed a boundary with a parent and they started to cry because they're overwhelmed at work, and we knew a mother or father that was depressed and cried or had anger or had a drinking problem, then we became the good girl or the good boy. And because of that, we become people pleasers. and perfectionist. So they're the two archetypes, people pleasing and perfectionism. It goes along underneath boundaries. So we will let our boundaries be breached to be perfect, to get the love from a boss, someone around us, or to people please, to be liked. So it starts with those big emotions we experience as a child that in our little 4 or 5-year-old body where it's overwhelming. So there's not even a cognitive connection when we're young. It's just that scary.
And it's a really big thing to overcome as adults. I mean, there's ways of doing it, obviously, but for a lot of people stepping into leadership roles, that can be the biggest barrier to them being an effective leader, is needing to people please. So again, what advice would you have for people in that situation? They aspire to leadership, but they know they struggle with people pleasing.
Yeah, there's several. I'll answer this in several ways, like a spectrum of answers. When I finished my MBA and I stepped into big leadership roles and finally became a finance director, I was an executive. I had to go back and do healing work. We have to go back and heal our inner child, the inner parts of ourselves. There's parts therapy, inner child work, there's embodiment work like breath work. You have to go back because being an executive or a senior leader, you are triggered. You are triggered daily, if not hourly, by staff, by conflict, by responsibility. And we need a 40-something-year-old or a 50-year-old online, not a scared 5 or 6-year-old. So it's kind of a big ball of, I could talk about that for a long time. I work with a lot of executives, and what we do is deep inner work, right? Because I know they're smart enough to make great strategic decisions. They've got a great board around them. I know that you generally inherit a solid structure, or you know what the company or sales team or marketing team need to do. It's how do we regulate ourselves that we're so present at work that we can be operating at a high function. That's one thing. And I think the other thing we need to do when we're leaders is we need to look at where we leak energy. Your energy is your currency. Energy is your secret weapon, and energy and vitality is what helps me to be a high performer. I fly nearly every week and spend overnight in one city, and I come home and I'm present with my son and husband. We've got a super busy life. So I constantly look at where is my energy and vitality going so I can perform at a high level. You know, Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, all the presidents and prime ministers around the world, they all have had high vitality. Look at what they do in a day, and we've got the same number of hours. So I never say I don't have enough time. I look at my energy and priorities. That's kind of the second other thing leaders we need to think about.
I always say to people, it's not time management, it's energy management that's important for all those reasons. You know, it's the amount of energy that you bring. And look, going back to kids as well, I mean, you look at like for me, my little 2-year-old grandsons, like they've got so much energy. You know, it's the joy of that sort of human growth hormone they have.
Yeah. They're like little energizer buddies. And it's energizing to be around energized people, right? But you know, where are we leaking energy into worrying? Where are we leaking energy into managing staff that we need to have an honest conversation with, or colleagues where we can just resolve conflict in a way? Like I'm always aiming for conflict resolution, but in a way where we're empowered. So, you know, in my brave conversation trainings that I run for companies, it's like, what's the conversation you're avoiding? That's the one you need to have today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in the book, you also talk about when plan A and plan B don't work out, what's plan C and so on. Can you walk us through maybe a time when you've had to embrace that really unexpected path and what happened for you?
Oh gosh, so many times in my life. Absolutely, Ros. Look, and I'll add to sort of what you're describing. The narrative arc of this book, the point I really want to land is, what if plan C was always the plan? So what if plan C was always the plan? The job you lost 5 years ago, you've ended up here. Where you've ended up was always the plan. Even finding yourself as a single mother or a single father, meeting a different kind of soulmate later in life, that was always the plan. So it's a way, that narrative is a way of embracing what we think of as failure, as plan A and plan Bs are the catalyst to growth and transformation, and the version of who you are is in your plan C. So my plan A, which I shared on Big Miracles, the Channel 9 TV show, was My plan A was freezing my eggs when I was 38. I had a breakup with a guy I thought I was going to marry, have kids with. So I froze my eggs at 38. Then I used those frozen eggs when I was 44, and that didn't work. So my plan B was then to do IVF at the age of 44. You've only got a 5% chance of it working. My plan C now ended up being buying donor eggs for America. Now, that was never part of my plan. No woman ever embarks on a fertility journey planning to use another woman's eggs. But as I reflect on how amazing this journey has been and the love I have for my son, I realized this was always the way it was meant to be. And when we embrace plan C, we don't actually have regrets for all the tough things that have happened. When you embrace your plan C, you go, look at who I became. And most of the time, it's brave, resilient, courageous, and also empathetic, compassionate, and softer, and more human. Because all of that failing makes us humble. And when you're humble, you're grateful. And when you're grateful, you attract a lot of amazing things in your life. More and more opportunities come towards us.
Mm. And that's that real integration of head and heart, isn't it? That maybe merging strategy with intuitive wisdom. So what advice, or what do you usually do with your clients to sort of get them to really think about this, balancing that analytical decision making, that cognitive brain, with really trusting their gut instinct?
I think it's important to start your day with some sort of, I don't like to use the word meditation because I don't meditate first thing in the morning. I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning to a crying boy, a baby boy. So there's no meditation for 2 hours because it's just, it's Phoenix and I hanging out, like usually 6 in the morning. So if you can meditate, if you don't have young children around, but some reflective journal process on a blank piece of paper with some sort of high frequency music, get your brain waves into another state. So can you find 10 to 15 minutes a day where you free-form journal write, away from the problem, away from family, away from work or colleagues, in a different room where a lot of analytical thinking happens? Once you start accessing a different brainwave state, you will start accessing different information. Then when you are in more your analytical, rational reasoning mind, which I have a big analytical mind, I'm an accountant and I solve commercial problems for a living, I would always have that base of that 10, 15 minutes a day to reflect on and pull from. So that's where you match. I feel like as a director, I would get a full body no when we did something that felt off. And I think learning to trust your body. So when you do breath work or any kind of embodiment work, you get better at reading your body sensations, is another way of trusting your gut as a leader.
Yeah, intuition is very linked to emotional intelligence, that ability to just, like I said, read what's going on in your body because it's telling you something, and usually telling you something really important. So let's talk about momentum. So when somebody's, just say they've got the vision and they've started taking those small steps, that sort of advice to take one small step every day that leads you in the direction of your goals. Sometimes people can start to get, I suppose, either complacent, or they lose momentum, or they get sidetracked. What advice do you have people to get them to stay the course? If they've got a big, big vision and they're taking those small steps, and maybe that big vision isn't going to happen for 5 years, what advice do you give people to keep them moving forward?
I think you've always got to draw the dots between your decisions. So I knew that writing this book was going to lead me to speaking and was going to lead me to corporate coaching. So, but it was like 6 months and several arguments with my publisher and me feeling very lost and confused. Writing process can be very confusing. And so even when I had different jobs before I became a CFO, and I was a deputy CFO for a while. I was promised to be an executive, and I was in this role. I felt like I was in the biggest holding pattern. So I got to this company and I realized that the role I wanted, someone was in that role, and then they were not going to leave. They had to die on the job. Does anyone be in that position? You're in a company and you're like, the person above me is not going to leave, and I was promised that role. So we've all had some version of that where it's like, okay, I've got to figure out what I'm learning here, what new skills I'm making, what new relationships am I gaining? How is this joining and connecting to my ultimate goal? So I work closely Probably every week I look at my own vision board, I call it my visioning tool. And I'm like, where am I going? Where am I going? And I make sure what I'm doing now is connected to that ultimate goal. And I think having that conversation with ourselves is essential. And if it feels like we're off path, ask ourselves, really, are we off path? Because maybe we're not. And if we've said yes because it's shiny and there's more immediate gratification, we need accountability. Like, why are we diverted off where we need to sit down and bunker down and work hard for a couple of months on this project or whatever it might be? So I think we live in an age now where we all want a lot more gratification. We want more selfie photos, Instagram photos, more feelings of accomplishment. But I think having a mentor or a coach to keep us on the straight and narrow is essential. I've had coach both informal and formal since I was 29. So I've had that for 20 something years now. And because of that, I've moved fast through everything I've wanted to achieve.
Yeah, it really is important. Now, this one's purely a question for people who are caring. So for those of you who don't have caring responsibilities, A, good for you. And secondly, no, sorry, this is just for people with caring responsibilities. So we have people in the workplace who are struggling with maybe high-performing careers and also caregiving responsibilities. It does tend to be women, but that's not always the case. And we don't seem to really be landing this work-life balance piece. What's your advice for people in that situation?
I don't think there is balance. I think at any day you might look at me and go, wow, you've like, my husband was away on the weekend, so I spent the whole weekend with my son. But I'm flying to Sunshine Coast next week. So there's no such thing as balance. It's what does the shape of this week look like that we all get our needs met? So there's some weeks you might be driving a sick mother to hospital for cancer treatment. My mum's got breast cancer. She's at the other side now. She's had done the course. There was a time there was a real focus on her. Now there's a focus on something else. So no, you're in the season of that. You're in the season of being a carer, and we all are, okay? And we all might be at some point. So just knowing when you're in that season, that's where some focus is, and a focus will be pulled away from something else, and know that it's temporary. I also look at myself, and I know we actually probably give more to work than we need to. I'm just going to be honest. When I really achieved a sense of, if you want to call it balance, by the end of my career, I dialed down my outputs, and I was able to be a high-performing executive without this constant outputting. And I had way more effective conversations with the CEO and executives around the world. And I'd be like, what do you need this week from my team? Like, what are the priorities? So I think if you learn the art of focus and the art of prioritizing, what are the top 3 things that I need to get done for my job? And you probably don't need to work on the 4th, 5th, and 6th thing. And that energy goes into caring. That's how we have a great week. That's how we have all the 10 balls in the air.
Yeah,
and
really.
outsource help as well. We don't need to cook and clean, and right. So I've become really good at. I don't. My husband cooks. He's made tacos for dinner. I can smell them right now. He does washing up. He's a Virgo, so like he keeps such a clean house. I'm like, I can't do this. But I pay the bills and I keep admin going. So in your household, play to your strengths. Like, what is your zone of genius? Do that. They do their zone of genius, and you split the other stuff in between. We don't try and do things 50-50. We just go, what are we best at, and how are we best as a team?
That's great advice. Now, if we think about somebody's listening right now or listening to the recording later on, I hear what you're saying, but I just feel really, really stuck right now. And I don't see any way forward. I don't see what that smallest step for me is. What advice would you give that person?
This has been me many times in my life. So I know that, like I was in the bowels of my career going, I don't know if I want this anymore, but it's paying the bills, or there's so many ways we can be stuck. We can be financially stuck. We can be, in our marriage going, this just doesn't feel like great anymore. However, I'm still in love, but I'm not, loving it. There's so many ways to be stuck. I think removing yourself from the situation for a little while, like the spaciousness, playing. I look back at the versions of me, and I got clarity when I just did things with my girlfriends, went to like little things, go to the movies, organize a night out, have dinner with some friends, get some different perspectives, because we're never stuck. All we are stuck is if we've got blind spots and we are not holding another perspective. So we get stuck when we have polarizing views. I've got to stay in my job or quit it. I've got to stay in my marriage or quit my marriage. I've got to wait till the kids get older, or I've got to stay. Like we get stuck when we're stuck in duality or polarity, when there is shades in the middle. So first, I think talking to more people and asking the wise counsel of those around us. Also know that when we're stuck, we're not stuck. We're probably in a cocooning phase, or we're gestating a new idea. So you're in a gestation period. And sometimes I'm like, okay, come on, like before I wrote this book, I was stuck. I was gestating the ideas, and I'm like, I know I'm meant to do something. I don't get what it is. So I would just do a lot of journal writing and reflections. And then suddenly one day it started to flow through me. So I don't worry about being stuck anymore. I more sit in the space of what am I creating that's not yet clear. So we've got to ask ourselves better questions. So instead of I'm stuck, it's what is my heart and soul trying to tell me? What guidance do my friends repeatedly give me that I don't take? Do I respect their guidance? Do I respect how they live their life? Yes. Can I take some steps forward based on what they're saying? Yes. The other thing to do is start moving your body. So if we give ourselves a bit of dopamine and endorphins first thing in the morning, suddenly we can feel and see clearer. So neural pathways are not firing because we don't have neurotransmitters creating new connections in our brain. So sometimes when I'm really stuck, I'll just get on the treadmill in my trackies and just walk really fast. So I've got a baby, I can't go far. And I'm like, I just need to move my body. I need to open a channel. So what it does, it opens a channel to your higher self. Even if 10 minutes, really fast on a treadmill will do that. Any kind of body movement.
Wonderful. All right, I'm going to open the floor to see if anyone in the audience has any questions. You can pop up your hand either physically if we can see you, or use the little icon if you can't. Love to hear what other people would like to ask.
Who's found this chat helpful? I'd love to know. Thumbs ups or nods. Has anyone actually found what I've shared a little bit helpful, insightful? Awesome.
Yep, getting some nods. Fantastic.
Yeah, Evelyn.
Lisa's just ordered the book.
Oh, awesome, Lisa.
I've dropped the link in the chat so people can grab the link. So questions or comments, doesn't need to be a question if you just got something you'd like to say.
Or if you want a bit of coaching, if you're stuck with something in your life, you're looking for just a new perspective. Okay, Jennifer's got a hand up.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Jennifer.
Yes.
I think I loved the part you were talking about before, we were talking about children and parenting, the parents, about the boundaries and how depending what course all that takes, about how people can become perfectionists, or the other one, which I can't recall just now. But it's great to know that it's okay not to be perfect. And I think that's the biggest thing, because if you're trying to be perfect, you never let go, and you never, it's so much harder to be doing anything because you're trying to be perfect, which isn't possible. So I loved that.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. That means a lot. Thank you. I had been at 3 times in my career from perfectionism, and perfectionism is the fastest way to reduce the size of our world. You don't take risks when you're a perfectionist. And I think I've had a really interesting decade of my life since I turned 40, because I think I got to 40 and I was not married. I had no kids. I was pretty burnt out. I was just a CFO. I got to CFO at 39. I was 2 years into and I was hitting burnout. And I remember thinking, well, according to society's standards, I'm a failure. And according to my culture, we get married young in my culture, arranged marriage, and you have 3 kids by the time you're in your early 30s. So I thought, well, as far as my culture goes, I haven't really made it So I started to be braver than I'd ever been, and I started to really live authentically. And I found that I wasn't afraid of failing. And it took a lot to overcome that. But I remember thinking there were many rock bottoms. And that's actually when I went to Peru and I did ayahuasca with shamans in Peru. I was like, okay, I want to really learn how to do life my own way. I want to learn how to be brave. And ayahuasca, does anyone here know what ayahuasca is, or has you've heard about it? It's like psychedelic therapy you do with shamans in Peru. He's saying, yeah. And so that opened my world up to just be braver and braver. I wrote my book thinking it doesn't matter if no one buys it. I really thought that the first book, and 6,000 people bought it and got translated into French. I thought, wow, that's cool. And so every time I started to do things, I was like, it's okay if it doesn't work out. But so much of my life hadn't worked out. I thought I'd be married by 28 and have 3 kids before 32. I'd have this executive career. I just thought all things would be easy and smooth and happen earlier. And I think it's wonderful when life doesn't turn out the way you hope, because I think it actually makes us way more open-minded. I think it's not ideal if life turns out exactly as we want. And I think when we raise kids and we want them to be happy, or we want things to go well for them, I don't think that's ideal. It's setting them up to struggle as adults. Because as adults, a whole lot of stuff goes wrong all the time, right? It's just life. So, you know, even with my son, I do one day, he's only 1, but I think, yeah, I want to raise him to be resilient, to get back up when he's knocked down. When someone says something mean to him, how do we reframe it? How do we look at different perspectives? Because I kind of wish I had that from my own parents. I had to kind of parent myself in my 40s. And so, yeah, I love that, Jennifer, about perfectionism. I think the more we embrace progress and try new things, regardless, you know, if we fail, I think that's, you know, where we get breakthroughs. When I do my motivational keynote, I get a whole lot of shares about little brave acts. Hopefully, when I've spoken today, you've all thought about what thing you might do in the next day. Have you guys got some ideas of kind of brave things you might be doing in the next 24 hours? I don't know, Roz, I might throw it to you. What brave thing are you going to do?
In the next 24 hours?
Yeah.
I've got to have a challenging conversation with somebody in my family about some things that have been happening, and it's raising a whole bunch of childhood trauma for me. So that's going to be my brave thing.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. And what kind of freedom do you think you will have on the other side of that?
I really feel like there's a whole range of things in that for me. There's going to be having had that difficult conversation with that person for the very first time. I think there's a lot of freedom in having done it. You know, I think the first one's going to be the hardest one. And I also feel like there'll be a real sense of freedom from, again, that childhood, the patterning that's come up. And in a lot of ways, it's been tracking through my whole life of not having a voice, like having my voice silenced when things get important. And for me, that's a really big hurdle to get over. So, yeah. Looking
well
forward
done.
to it, but scared as well.
Yeah. Well, most amazing things are on the other side of fear. And so mastery of life is mastery of fear, and mastery of fear is little brave acts. So, you know, we take 365 little brave acts a year and we change our life 365 times faster. So it's speed. It's the speed of bravery that changes our life. So you could have delayed this another year or 6 months, right? And then we've lost momentum because, like, from what you've shared, Roz, when you're brave with this conversation, how your energy is going to increase. And then all these other things that feel hard aren't going to feel hard. You're like, if I had that conversation with that scary family member that felt scary to even do, well, all these other things aren't that scary, right? That's how we become very brave.
Love it. Anyone else? Questions, thoughts, ideas? All good?
Evelyn.
Look at Evelyn.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Ross. I think you've really affirmed me today, because something you said just hit me, and you said that if we don't take the change that we are supposed to take, the universe is going to do it for us. And that is exactly the space I'm in right now. And so just listening to you, and telling us, and you look so good at 49. You've gone through a lot, IVF journey. You've lost a job. I just lost a job, and I was feeling sorry for myself. But I think you said something like, when you see somebody who has done something that you want to do, then it gives you, it's like gives you permission, or like shows you that it's going to be okay. So I like the way you've urged us to be brave, and I think that is where I am right now. I had a call with Rose a few weeks ago, I think over a month, and she urged me and she told me, because I always wanted to be a coach, I was always coaching and mentoring people at work, and she just told me, just look for one person, look for 2 people who you can do a free call, and I'm happy that I already have 4 people that I'm coaching.
Amazing.
And so it's to increase the momentum. I think what I'm carrying out of this is to increase the momentum and to keep doing it, and to answer this question: what regret would I have if 5 years from now I don't take the step? So I really found this very helpful, and I'll be getting the book so that I can go further. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Evelyn. Thank you so much. Do you know, Evelyn, I mean, you were made redundant. It sounds like I actually got fired from my job. I got fired. The universe made this whole this whole thing line up in a perfect way. And that's a long story for over a drink in a bar one day, Evelyn, if I'll come to Nairobi. You're in Nairobi, are you? And I'll have a drink and I'll tell you that story. However, I would not be doing what I'm doing today, with my business as abundant and big as it is, with the brand and the books, if I was not walked out and fired in 2014. So when people ask me, what are your defining moments? It was that moment, that day. And I remember it so vividly, because I knew I was being saved from my old life. And so I suspect, Evelyn, after you do these 4 coaching sessions, you know, you're going to be there in the shower and just having a reflection. It's these quiet moments in the showers when we're alone, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, I'm here helping people, or because I lost my job. So yeah, things have to be removed to create a vacuum in our life. So the vacuum's been created, and when a vacuum's created, good stuff fills it, or high vibrational stuff fills it. So well done. Thank you, Evelyn.
Wonderful. All right, folks, that's all we've got time for today. So I want to just thank you very much, Sheila. That's been absolutely wonderful. Really appreciated your time and just, coming and spending time with us. And I hope everybody got as much out of it as I did.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful connecting with you.
Lovely. We've got some really lovely things coming through in the chat too. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate everyone turning up.
See you later.